most of everybody thinks that Jay Powell is going to come out and say no cut, even though President Trump has called for interest rates to be cut.
Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on, do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
No.
I don't know how, loud Trump is going to get this second time around because we've already been through the song and dance. But I know that there will probably be some reaction if Jay Powell does come out and say, we're holding interest rates, we're not cutting them. What is going on, everybody? GM, happy new week to you. I am Zach Guzman, coming to you live from our Brooklyn studios here in New York City, as Coinage, again, is recapping the biggest moves and headlines in Web3, as we always do, both here on the live stream and at coinage.media. You can check us out there and co-own us. We got big news to get into in terms of Coinage making DAO history here in the U.S. We're going to get into that in a sec. You'll see it on our run of show. But first, a little bit of some sell-off. This is not the first time we've seen this happen in terms of some red activity. As we look at right now, the heat map, in terms of all the red, Bitcoin selling off by about 3%. It was a little bit worse just a few moments ago. We're going to dig into all the reasons why we're seeing that, with DeepSeek potentially out in China making really some ripples in the AI community. Not too good when it comes to what people are looking out of DeepSeek, just in terms of maybe potentially, we got a huge massive sell-off right now in NVIDIA and all the AI-related names. Bitcoin, as we know, has been increasingly correlated with the NASDAQ moves we're seeing today. Maybe potentially the beginnings of, if Bitcoin can hold here and we see some of this play out, we're going to watch trading all day, but potentially maybe a break in that correlation if maybe some of the AI fears and tech sell-off happens, but Bitcoin can hold. So pretty important to watch not just the $100,000 level for Bitcoin, but also over here on Ethereum. We're seeing a little bit of a bounce back after a nasty sell-off for ETH. And we're going to get into maybe a little bit of some of the strategy pivots from them in a sec as well. So a lot to cover on today's show. But really, that is potentially, why we're seeing so much red on the heat map right now, is just really because of DeepSeek, which maybe this isn't a name that you really hadn't heard of, but it's a Chinese artificial intelligence company that has shown that you really can make these things cheaper. And potentially throws into some concerns of the status quo of what people had thought around the way that all of this was going to grow, and massive sell-offs when it comes to all the tech names. Of course, again, all of these companies have been investing heavily into their own infrastructure. This is something we highlighted last year in terms of every one of these big tech companies basically in an arms race to say, look, we need to have a bunch of chips and we need to have our own way to scale this technology. And, different tech companies have taken different positions on that. Some are open source, kind of what Meta's trying to do, and some are not. As Elon Musk has constantly called out and critiqued OpenAI for, not being so open in their attempts to build AI. And so it is interesting to maybe look at DeepSeek as a name that kind of caught a lot of people off guard in terms of what you can do even cheaper. And that's basically it, is that China's DeepSeek AI tool is surpassing ChatGPT in usage and therefore requiring less complex chips from the likes of NVIDIA, at least according to one analyst in looking at all of this. And so, as NVIDIA sells off, you could potentially see maybe some of those fears trickle into other tech names because of how, substantial that name has been when it comes to investing in general. In not just tech, but really, I think, kind of increasingly becoming somewhat important as it's made its way into a lot of different portfolios, just in terms of how big it has grown. And today, we're seeing shares off about 13% in early morning trading. Pretty nasty sell-off. I mean, there's no other way to talk about that. And so, you got to kind of adjust and see what happens. But I don't think, obviously, again, all these markets are interlinked and related, but in terms of the narrative we're seeing for crypto, I believe this is probably a little bit of an overdone move, as people realize this doesn't have so much to do. Maybe it does with some of the AI attached names in crypto. We'll take a look at those a little bit as well. Yeah, Akash seeing a little bit of some sell pressure today, down to 256. So, I mean, as we dig into some of these things, again, there's a lot of long-term excitement in the AI space when it comes to crypto, whether it's, projects like Akash that we've highlighted multiple times in terms of decentralized cloud computing, or maybe even Tau, and why Barry Silbert is so excited about the Tau ecosystem and continues to invest over there. But it has been a bit of a tough go for some of these AI attached names. So I just want to highlight kind of why we're seeing the moves that we're seeing there, and why potentially, this week will be interesting to see how it all shakes out as we move along, because there's a lot more to get to, including a very important key Fed decision we'll talk about on Wednesday, as well as potentially some more confirmations for a lot of Trump's picks to lead various agencies. But let's start there, because that is rather important when it comes to not just price, but also I think momentum as we carry through this week. Because if you haven't been paying attention, things are moving quick. Last week we had the SEC basically throw SOB 121 out the window, and now seemingly allow banks to custody crypto. That was a big thing that both Republicans and Democrats wanted. Biden vetoed it. And now at the SEC, as you have Mark Ueda and Commissioner Peirce both leading the charge, a lot of pro-crypto things are happening. And we covered all that. If you haven't watched it yet, we recapped why Hester Peirce's crypto task force is increasingly looking like it's for real in accelerating a lot of the experimentation here in the US. So ETH staking potentially looks like it could be approved in short order for Ethereum ETFs, as well as in-kind redemption. BlackRock filed for that on Friday. And so usually, from what we've seen, BlackRock doesn't file for things that they don't think will get approved. And so, their filing for the Bitcoin ETFs was a big indicator. Those then got approved. Of course, we also know that Gensler went to court and lost, and so kind of had to. But when it comes to both of those things, in-kind redemptions means that people don't really need to flow through dollars. They can just swap in the ETFs straight into Bitcoin, vice versa. So it would be a pretty big development, and we'll have to see what happens. They might wait for the new chair to come in before approving something like that. I don't know. But at the very least, Hester Peirce did tell us that she wanted to revisit those and would be revisiting those early on. And so exciting things to come, I think, on the crypto front. But regardless, let's talk about one thing that has become the norm, which is, of course, MicroStrategy for the 12th consecutive week buying up Bitcoin. And, for the last few weeks, it hasn't been that large, surprisingly. I think the last week and last purchase that we saw from Michael Saylor was actually just in the order of a couple $100 million, which to most people, that's a big order, right? That's not like a small thing. But for MicroStrategy, which has now stacked billions and billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, it wasn't necessarily the largest ever purchase. But this one announced today actually was, and was quite sizable, not just in terms of how much money they threw into this new purchase, but also the price they paid. Look at that. MicroStrategy acquiring more than 10,000 Bitcoin for $1.1 billion at a price of more than $105,000 per Bitcoin. So right now, that last purchase currently in the red. But of course, as you can see, not in the red on all of their holdings, which is now more than 470,000 Bitcoin acquired for $30.4 billion. So still overall, very much in the green. But the other addition to that is that they also announced their own kind of new way to move into, I think, continuing to fund all of this, which we talked about before, is not just through equity, but also through bonds. And now also this new stock offering. MicroStrategy announcing a proposed Strike preferred stock offering, which is a little bit of a new kind of wrinkle in what Michael Saylor has been trying to do. Again, all of this is quite complex when it comes to how they're actually trying to do this, but nothing has really broken from Michael Saylor's overall strategy of buying up Bitcoin, continuing to hold, and trying to figure out new ways to make money on it. And if you want to dig into the specifics, we had a nice chat with Bitwise's head of Alpha Strategies. Jeff Park joined us on the show to kind of dig into why what Michael Saylor is doing is often misunderstood, and he can explain it better than I can. So go watch that one on our YouTube page if you haven't seen it yet, because we got into the nitty-gritty of what's really to come on the MicroStrategy front. But nonetheless, Michael Saylor undeterred, 12th consecutive week of Bitcoin buying, this time a noticeable step up in 1.1 billion being the size of his bag. We'll see what happens if he goes for 13 weeks potentially next week. It's a lot of money being plowed into Bitcoin. And of course, as we know, these do matter. 1.1 billion, you might say, Zach, how big is that relative to what we saw on the ETF front? Well, let's turn over there because CoinShares, as they always do, did take a look back at exactly how much money flowed into crypto investment products. And surprise, surprise, number was pretty high. Keep in mind, this is when Trump was coming into office. We saw the executive order do some things. We saw excitement grow. This was post-Memecoin launch. And in total, it was, as you can see there, close to $2 billion, $1.9 billion flowing into digital asset investment products, according to CoinShares. As always, most of that into Bitcoin. But not to be outdone, Ethereum rebounding with inflows of $205 million. And that's important to note. Ripple and XRP, we also threw in there, $18.5 million. And so, we just chatted with the Omni co-founder, Austin King, about why potentially Ripple could flip Ethereum. If you really want to get triggered in the ETH camp, you can go check that one out as well. But I think overall, there is a lot of excitement when it comes to ETH. If you believe in the mission, we caught up with Gitcoin founder Kevin Owocki last week on Friday to kind of dig into this little pivot as Ethereum tries to sell Wall Street on why it's so important relative to Solana. It's not been a surprise. A lot of people in the Ethereum camp not necessarily happy with how much momentum Solana's been building. You had President Trump launching his meme coins on Solana, but he's also working on Ethereum for Trump's World Liberty Financial DeFi project, which we'll get into in a second. But here's what Kevin told us when it comes to the new strategy and pivot at Ethereum and how they're keeping pace. Take a listen to what he told us.
What you're seeing is the Ethereum ecosystem struggle with scale and growing into its final form at a time in which alternative layer ones and specifically I think Solana is getting a bid. With Solana, it feels like they're trying to be decentralized NASDAQ or NASDAQ on chain. And I think that Ethereum is competing on a couple different fronts. And because it's got this modular sort of like sprawling ecosystem, it's just a little bit harder of a story to tell.
Now, it is a harder story to tell, I think, if you, again, think about the idea of all of the momentum in the metrics and number go up in terms of transaction and fees. Once you roll out the Ethereum Layer 2 roadmap, you're kind of eating into those. I think long term, you can't really doubt what we heard from Kevin and what we heard from other Ethereum believers in that you drop fees, more people can build on Ethereum, net positive long term, but in the short kind of medium term, a lot of people on Wall Street might not be sold in terms of the directional moves and continued momentum, especially if Solana can be cheaper, faster, better, if you want to say it is. And of course, our community did crown Solana Project of the Year. And so there is real fear around that potentially not just the president, but anybody else who wants to really build something could just opt for Solana. The pushback on that is maybe they're just being misunderstood. And that's why it's interesting to think about new efforts. And we got into all that with Kevin in terms of new efforts to explain this, not just to, I think, builders, because certainly they do that well. And, we're going to be at ETH Denver again this year for the third year in a row. It's exciting to see. But outside of just the community itself, the Ethereum Foundation, really top leadership seems to be making the case that, look, we haven't done enough to explain it to people outside of the developer community. And that's why they launched Etherealize. This is a new kind of splinter arm to explain what Ethereum's all about to the Wall Street crowds, to try and get them to either A, onboard more easily or understand how they can use Ethereum to maybe tokenize a lot of the things that now might be possible because President Trump and the SEC are now allowing a lot more experimentation, or at least it seems that way, in the US. And so pretty interesting to see Ethereum mount this wartime offensive. A lot of people are excited about Vitalik getting more involved, Joe Lubin and Consensus getting more involved, saying that, look, this one's on us. Maybe we need to do more. And so we'll see what happens and plays out. It's early in 2025, potentially. Now might be the time to reactivate that excitement because ETH Denver is coming up in about a month, and we'll see whether or not any of that can change. But right now, it seems like even from within the Ethereum camp, a lot of cries for, hey, let's get this done, including from Paradigm, by the way. One of the big VCs wrote an open letter as well saying that regardless of where you think Ethereum's going, they need to move faster. They need to move faster is what Paradigm says. I don't know if you want to move faster in the wrong direction, so I don't know if that's always the case, but regardless, That is the news on the Ethereum front. And I think it's interesting, too, because let's shift over to what's happening in the U.S., which is, of course, as we noted, a pretty big pivot in terms of allowing crypto experimentation to play out. That could be good. Maybe we'll just use the same point. Sometimes things are good if they move quick, but maybe not good if they move too quick in the wrong direction. And I'll just use Vitalik. Maybe we'll stay on that because it was Vitalik himself that was recently tweeting about all of this. And I want to pull up his tweet. I don't know where it went. Where did you go, tweet? Let's see if I can find it. But basically, Vitalik was out talking about some of the fears around presidential coins and whether or not it's a good thing to have presidents launching their own coins. Here it is. And Vitalik basically landed on no. And a lot of people have been talking about Trump's meme coins. And obviously, we can take a look at those. But Vitalik's main point is that presidents probably shouldn't be launching these things because it opens up a vector for bribes to happen. Because you essentially have a token that, you can kind of have a weird non-quid pro quo. Hey, buy this thing and maybe I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. But no one really knows because there's no direct, quid pro quo. And Vitalik's words himself saying that maybe that's a path that we shouldn't go down. But here in the US, we are, of course, already going down that path because, as we know, Trump's meme coin is already out there. And it's trading right now at about $28, market cap of $5 billion. A little bit softer today. But it is potentially, a problem if you think about some of the risks that Vitalik raises. And I would say, that those risks are even bigger if you look at another project, which is World Liberty Financial. And right now, that token sale currently still ongoing, approaching, what is it? I think there's less than 1.8 billion tokens remaining. But this is a project that maybe doesn't get as much attention, but Trump's family, Eric, Don Jr., even Barron, attached to World Liberty Financial in this token raise, raising money from foreign investors and domestic investors alike, though it is limited to accredited investors, which might not be extremely DeFi, because you'd have to make more than $200,000 a year for the last 2 years or qualify in another way. And this token is very similar. I had this tweet. The president and Eric Trump both retweeted kind of a look at why they would have launched in DC their meme coin right around the same time that this crypto ball was happening with all the big insiders. And I thought it looked like a very obvious power play of, you're in my house now, and they retweeted that theory. So seemingly endorsing it. But then you have World Liberty Financial, which is taking in money from foreign investors like Justin Sun, Tron founder, and buying up Tron's token. Now, I'm not saying that's a quid pro quo of, hey, invest in us and we'll buy your token and we'll make you, the kings of crypto. But that's kind of my point. My point is that you don't know. And that's Vitalik's point, is that these things open up ethical questions that I'm not sure anyone in crypto necessarily has talked about a lot openly, because when you're in defense mode, you might not even think that this is possible. No one really thought 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, that a president would ever launch a meme coin. And maybe not a lot of people even knew what was going on with World Liberty Financial. And so, I'm not taking a position rather on whether or not, it's good or bad. But I do think that a lot of people have not necessarily talked about this in depth or even thought about what potentially could happen. When you have, by the way, if you read the fine print, I think it's like 75% of the revenues going to these other entities, right? In terms of revenues coming from this DeFi platform specifically, going to other entities and Trump-aligned entities. The other 25% going to the early team, I think, or, something like that. And so that's 75 and 25%. They make it very clear if you buy this token, you're not attached to any potential revenues from the platform, just governance. And so, all those things could change. This was launched before, the new SEC came in. So who knows? And maybe there's a lot of speculation around what could be done between this project and the meme coins. I don't know. But I'm just saying that there are a lot of questions around all of this. And I think, we as a space should be talking about it, maybe potentially a little bit more. If you have any thoughts, by all means, reply, as I've been enjoying reading the comments after Trump and Eric Trump retweeted my thread. More than 24 million views on that boy, and counting. And so some of the comments have been interesting. I won't say all of them, but some of them. Anyways, so that's what's going on in Trump land. We'll continue to watch that. Of course, something to do with the Fed watch on Wednesday as well. But before we get into Trump v. Powell, I do want to give us here at Coinage a bit of a shout out, because we made history in terms of finally delivering on what we always set out to do, which, of course, if you know about us, this isn't news to you. Since 2022, we've been building as a DAO co-op here in the US. Our whole premise has been whether or not we can bring together people who want to build with our shared mission of building a community-owned outlet and brand. And I'm excited to say we finally paid out our first non-dividend distribution to active members. And hopefully we can continue to do that as we grow Coinage together. If you haven't yet minted, you can mint a Coinage NFT today to become a co-owner, go through the process, and become eligible for patronage dividends. It's a new model for how to build something for the long term. And I think really does change the way that people have looked at community ownership. It's not all about maybe buying something and selling at a higher price on somebody else to dump on them. But really, we've had people who have been in this since the start. So I want to give a shout out to a lot of those people who have minted. There's our little breakdown of caucus tiers and network members. And all of us vote together to steer on where this goes. It's been a very fun experiment. So if you've been along for the ride, I can't thank you enough. We at Coinage can't thank you enough for having helped us build this to get here, as we're about to cross 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, as our newsletter continues to grow, as the president is retweeting us, as we've had Hester Peirce on the show a bunch of times. We are the mouthpiece together, and I really do think it's been fun to build this. As we've tokenized everything, it's a very simple 50-50 split between our caucus members and our network members. We try not to make this complicated. We don't have a token, and we are here really on the part of our membership. If you mint, that money goes into the DAO. If we sell an ad, that money goes into the DAO. And now we have this whole arm of staking. And so you can stake with us and that money split 50-50 between our tech partners at Dike and our DAO. And so it's been a positive flywheel effect that's been really cool to build with you guys watching this. And as we do this show every Monday, it's been fun because I learn a lot sitting here. I'm just the talking face of this thing. But to be honest, it has been professionally and personally one of the cooler experiments I've ever been a part of. And yeah, I'm just super excited about what we have to build and the momentum that we have right now, because people are finally noticing. And I hope as we make this, distribution to members, more people might wake up to the idea of, hey, you can build legally in the US. Coinage is doing it. People are actually co-owning us. And it's not that different from cooperatives. In fact, we are a co-op. So maybe you're familiar with REI. Maybe you've had Ocean Spray grapefruit juice in the past, or seen those commercials where the guy's floating in the bog in overalls. Co-ops are great, and we are a registered co-op just trying to bring that on chain. And so if you're out there and you have an idea, maybe it's not crypto news, but you want to do something similar, me personally, I'd be happy to kind of tell you what I've learned in all this. And I also, lastly, as we kind of turn the page and wrap up this show, I want to give a shout out to the builders who had come before us, because obviously we are trying to do something here, and we're standing on the shoulders of other experiments that have come before us as well, including Constitution DAO, which I've given Graham and his team props, because as silly as that was, they raised $40 million to buy a replica Constitution, an original copy, I should say. And I think it showed what was possible in Web3. A bunch of people around the internet coming together to pool funds and do something. And even though they got outbid by Ken Griffin at Citadel, billionaire outbid him, it still, I think, excited a lot of people for this idea of the little guy grouping together to do something powerful. And, I saw that, and that was kind of the original, hey, maybe you could build a community-owned outlet that could be just as powerful. And so want to give a shout out to Constitution DAO and everybody who supported that project. And then also, there are a bunch of others out there that I think have been helpful in us trying to figure out what to do. But again, I have no answers on where this goes. I can't promise anything, but to anyone who has minted to support us thus far, I can't thank you enough personally. And join the Telegram if you haven't yet. And I'm excited to see where we take this in 2025, because we have some momentum at our back. And as crypto continues to surge, I think Coinage is well positioned. That is not legal financial advice, but I personally think Coinage is well positioned to continue doing what we're doing and grow this bad boy even bigger than we ever thought possible. And so thank you to everyone who has joined us thus far. If you haven't, again, you can go to coinage.media to learn more and co-own Coinage alongside me and a bunch of other people and the co-founder of Netflix as we revolutionize decentralized media. That'll be the last thing I say about that for now. To wrap up the show, looking ahead to what we have coming this week, it's a pretty big showdown. And I say big showdown because it's Trump v. Powell, the rematch, cage match, back again. We've covered this before. If you haven't really paid attention to the way that this dynamic might be at play, it's one of the more fascinating things, I think, in covering financial media. But President Trump was not very nice to Fed Chair Jerome Powell under his last administration. I believe he called him a few different names, which might not surprise you. But he's always pressured him to really cut rates. And, the Fed's supposed to be apolitical, and the Fed listens to the data, and the Fed makes decisions based on that. But it was at the last press conference that a reporter asked Fed Chair Powell about maybe stepping aside because President Trump had maybe pressured Jay Powell to step aside. Now, of course, the president can't fire the Fed chair, as, that's against the law. But he can call him names, and he can bully him in public. And so it sets up a very interesting question on Wednesday. It'll be the first Fed decision under President Trump's new second term. And most of the market right now is pricing in basically 100% odds of no change, basically keeping interest rates at exactly where they are right now. You see there, it's only about a 3% chance of a cut. But most of everybody thinks that we're going to be holding here, that Jay Powell is going to come out and say no cut, even though President Trump has called for interest rates to be cut. And I just want to play a little bit of a clip of that exchange when a reporter asked Jay Powell if he would step aside. It was a pretty strong response. Take a listen to what Jay Powell said.
Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on, do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
No.
So no is really the answer. And I don't know how, loud Trump is going to get this second time around because we've already been through the song and dance. But I know that there will probably be some reaction if Jay Powell does come out and say, we're holding interest rates, we're not cutting them, even though the market is largely expecting that to be the case. You'll probably see President Trump come out and immediately question what Jay Powell is doing, I think. And it will be a very interesting thing to watch as all of that shapes up because, as we know, Jay Powell has just in that clip shown he's not backing down this time, just as he didn't back down the first term. And so who's to say what happens, but certainly a very interesting thing to watch as we move forward throughout the year. And as we know, interest rates do indeed impact crypto prices. But for the time being, I want to leave with what we're looking at here. For the time being, pretty important numbers to watch on both Bitcoin and Ethereum as those key levels of 100K and 3,000 seem to be holding for now in this Monday sell-off. As always, we'll highlight all the big headlines in Web3 at coinage.media. You can head there for the biggest headlines around the space and key interviews that move this market. And indeed, as we continue to grow, perhaps more markets than just crypto. For everybody here at Coinage, can't thank you enough for tuning in on our news recap. You can also subscribe to our free newsletter to get that delivered into your inbox so you don't miss this and all of our other great content. For everybody here at Coinage, from me, for Texas, our producer over here, for the co-founder of Netflix, for everybody in our family, thank you again for your support. We'll see you again soon.